Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Jobin, and you are listening to Time to Talk, a podcast for caregivers. This podcast is dedicated to helping family caregivers in Ontario. Through expert tips and resources, you'll gain knowledge and validation for the ups and downs that come with caregiving. More importantly, you'll learn that you are not alone. It's so important to take this time for yourself, and we're glad that you're here. Today, I'm here with Shara Inote. Shara began her caregiving journey in 2005 when her father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. In 2008, she moved back to her hometown to help care for him. Her 15-year caregiving experience came with plenty of challenges and problem-solving solutions. And through her journey, she learned it is important to go with the flow and find humor in every situation. Shara, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. Thank
I
you.
we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us and to share your unique story and your dad's story. And we always want to create this space here on Time to Talk where Ontario caregivers can connect with one another and share. And we really hope that by hearing your story, someone out there that's listening is going to, connect with what you're saying and feel understood and seen and heard. So we're going to explore your journey that is filled with practical solutions and invaluable lessons for anyone that is also on their own unique caregiving path. So, Shara, I wanted to start out by asking you a little bit if you could tell us about your dad and how your caregiving journey began.
Yeah, for sure. So, first of all, my dad's name is Leslie, and he was amazing. He was an amazing dad, and our caregiving journey began. I had lived away out of the country, and he was kind of my caregiver for a long time. And as I was living away and checking in with him every week or a couple times a week, I noticed that there was a bit of a change in his cognitive abilities and his memory, in his flow of stories and that kind of stuff. So I had contacted his doctor and stated my concerns and asked if there was any way he could kind of pay attention to that the next time my dad was in. So that's exactly what happened. And he noticed also there was some changes. So he ended up sending him to a gerontologist who then did all the testing and eventually diagnosed him with Alzheimer's. So that was in 2005, and that's when our journey began. And I will say, however, that my dad was very pragmatic when he was
Mm-hmm.
diagnosed. Whatever he was supposed to do, he did. He got his financial things in order, his will, his power of attorneys, kind of mapped out what his care would look like. So that was a huge thing for us to have a starting point from, at least.
So this was a big shift in your father's life, obviously, and in his
Yeah.
overall health, but also a really big shift in your life as well. You mentioned that he was diagnosed in 2005,
Yeah.
but things, and you were living abroad at the time.
Yeah.
Things changed for you. Can you tell us a little bit about that and maybe some of the challenges on top of where you were living that you faced as your father's disease progressed?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, part of the challenge was being at a distance.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, for the first couple of years, he was still quite independent. So it was really just, he had a support system. He had, I think, by that point, been able to go to a day program. He still had a part-time job, that he was trying to maintain a sense of dignity and respect and contribution to society. So I mean it was difficult because I was far, but he was still very able, and we also live in an incredible neighborhood where people were keeping an eye on him as well. And I had other family members at the time that could check in and make sure he was okay. In 2008, I ended up moving back because as a few years had passed, it was clear that things were changing quite significantly. And so, I mean, the challenge there is I was young too. I was, of the benefit of being young, but also I was young. And so part of the challenge was having to not give up, change my lifestyle. Sorry, I don't want to say give up, but
Mhm.
change my lifestyle to be a caregiver. And, for anybody, that's a really difficult transition when you're used to having a certain relationship with someone and then it shifts to something else.
Mhm.
So that was part of that challenge there when we started our journey and throughout.
And so you moved back home to your hometown in 2008, and
Mhm.
then you are, of course, now you're here with your father.
Mhm.
And how did you find that additional challenges presented themselves in terms of the progression of his disease?
So here we are, and I think everybody at the beginning of any kind of diagnosis is a bit in denial,
Mm-hmm.
where we thought, this is either going to go very quickly or it's not going to go at all. It's not going to happen, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's quite common. So, just shifting as he was changing, we were lucky to be close enough that, we could keep an eye on him and be there daily, basically, for the first many years, actually. But there was a lot of shifting in our relationship and figuring out what he needs. What
Mm-hmm.
exactly does he need, and what can we do to help, and what are the services available, and how do we tap into those services, and how do we advocate for my father to ensure that his dignity is maintained and he maintains respect throughout his journey as well. So there was a lot of um, navigating all of that, and then eventually physically moving to be beside him, because he was living alone in his own home,
Mm-hmm.
actually. So we actually had an opportunity to be his neighbor, and that was amazing and very lucky to be able to do that. So eventually we could still allow him to be in his own home, maintain his dignity, and watch from afar with not baby video monitors and door alarms and that kind of stuff for a while, and automated light switches, things that
Yeah.
helped him maintain his independence in his own home. And then eventually we had to move in with him and manage everything with him in his home. But that was years later. So for many years, we were able to modify his home and modify our lives and modify everything to help him have his dignity and maintain that independence for as long as possible.
I love that you tried to find these innovative but practical solutions on how you could sort of maintain that level of comfort and security for your dad and the feeling, like you said, having you're not the first guest that we've talked about these solutions. Like we have these things that we have cameras now, we have,
Yeah.
the timers on the lights and all those kind of things. So those are all great things. And obviously your proximity helped. You brought up the word advocate.
Hmm.
And this is a big topic that comes up, across the board when we're talking about healthcare, but certainly in caregiving as well. How do we advocate not only for the person that we're caregiving for, but also for ourselves in these situations? So and as specific as you want to get, how did you advocate for your father and his care during this time?
Wow. I mean, we could go on for hours. Um, I mean, I think it started with us just being, and I say us because it was me and my husband
Mm-hmm.
eventually. I got married partway through the caregiving process. But it took a while to figure out how how we do this in the best way possible and
Mm-hmm.
how we can make this the best experience as possible and the best journey for my father. So advocating started with the doctor's phone call from the beginning, noticing there was a change, calling the doctor, mentioning what we've noticed and what I've noticed, and going from there. Um, Advocating also started in the gerontologist appointments where after many years, they were doing the same testing. And the testing was becoming very frustrating for my father, and he would leave feeling depleted from those appointments. So, having the conversations with that doctor, like, is it really necessary at this point to be doing these tests that frustrate him, that anger him, and that don't really help? I mean, we know what the problem is, and we know that it's progressive. So there was advocating from that perspective. There's advocating when we were lucky enough to access care, starting with the day program, the Alzheimer's Day program in our hometown. Amazing program, really great. My dad had a place to go. He had jobs at these places where he felt like he was going to work, is how
Yeah.
it was more framed. And he really helped, but it was also explaining that to that team. This is understanding my dad's personality, understanding what it is that what those keys, those little keys that open those doors. And he wanted to help and he wanted to feel useful, so they gave him those jobs at the day program. He did the dishes, he set the table, he set up the bowling, he did all that kind of stuff. And then eventually, when he wasn't interested in being a part of the group, it was discussions around how do we keep him there, but still be able to keep an eye on him without having really a personalized plan, because they're not set up for that.
Mm.
It's set up to be a group environment. So, just also brainstorming and asking questions like, would this be possible? What about this? Could we do this? And eventually we landed at a little Montessori corner for him in the same room as everybody else with all the things he loved. So he could just piddle away there and play or do whatever that kept him busy, but they could still keep an eye on him. He just wasn't part of the group. When we were able to access respite care eventually, because we were lucky to have some respite care, um, it was also just not taking things at face value. And I think overall, it was not taking things at face value. It's easy for people to say no or it's not possible. It takes work to come up with other solutions. And I didn't make many friends along this journey
Mm.
because I wouldn't take no as an answer, and there would be questions. And, I think people think, oh, we're so lucky to have this, or we're so lucky to have that. But we're also lucky to have our loved ones and to make sure that their lives are also fulfilled and enriched. So I think, part of the advocating as well was when we did get care in the home. My dad was still very aware of what was around. He still had his personality. He liked things the way he liked things. And explaining that, like, he likes to do this, he likes independence, he doesn't want to be pushed to do anything. If he doesn't want to do something, don't push him. We're not on an agenda. And basically, oh, and I'd love to have someone come and meet him first, not in scrubs, so it didn't seem like it was
Mm.
a PSW or healthcare. And just have a conversation, just speak to him like you would speak to anybody else. And there's not an agenda. If he doesn't want to do something, don't push him to do it. I mean, there's no reason that things have to be done on an agenda. So I think that was the biggest challenge we had, was having a conversation with an agency who was able to send some help. And basically they said, well, you get who you get. And that was not an answer that I would accept, actually. And my rebuttal was asking if that person had children or a child, and they did. And I said, when you were looking for care for, if you want to go out to a movie and you're looking for care for your child, would you let some random stranger in your house who you've never met before, who your kids have never met before, and just leave them alone with your children for hours at a time? Is that something you would do? And they're like, absolutely not. And I said, well, this is kind of what you're asking me to do, or this
Right.
is exactly what you're asking me to do. And it's not, that's not helpful, and it's not going to happen. And, just finding ways to change people's minds, because I get that there's a lot of care needed. There's, shortages in healthcare. There's shortages everywhere. People are burnt out. But it still doesn't mean it's okay to, in my father's case, treat him like he was a number. And so a lot of the advocating was more educating around that. Because I think people forget sometimes. We all get caught up and we have our things we need to do and we have our checklists. But my father was still a person, and needed to be identified, as his person.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're painting a picture of how you advocated for your dad and his care to be a more personalized approach, which I don't think anybody would see a problem with in terms of how they would want to be treated themselves. So talk to me a little bit about the idea of person-centered care. Or person-centered care, and how is that specifically what you're talking about, this sort of individually tailored approach to that?
Yeah, in our case, or well, in any case, actually, person-centered care was, yes, an individualized approach to my father's care. And what does he like? What does he not like? What is joyful for him? What do we do to create that environment that's calm and reassuring, and little like no embarrassment and no shame, and that overall dignity, again, that was our theme, as you can tell, was providing that dignity. So yes, person-centered care is just paying attention, to that person. And as I said, I understand that there's some agendas, and there's, in some training as well. It is very task oriented, and in certain cases, it doesn't need to be. And it really, some people just need to have someone to chat with. There's no agenda. And in our case, luckily, there was no agenda. I mean, if he didn't want to do something, if he didn't want to eat when someone thought it was time to eat, it didn't matter. We'll try 10 minutes later. We'll try half an hour later. It doesn't matter. And so it's really taking a step back and, yes, treating someone like the way you would like to be treated, and having the empathy to put yourself in their shoes and try and figure out, how would you feel if someone was treating you the way, whatever it is. And I mean, it's not just in caregiving, it's everyday life, but
This is, yeah. These are the chats I have with my son when I'm trying to talk to, we always treat people the way we would want to be treated. Exactly. And we shouldn't lose those lessons for different scenarios later on in life. It's something that we should keep with us. If you support someone in need and feel anxious or overwhelmed with your caregiving responsibilities, you're not alone. The Ontario Caregiver Organization, or OCO, exists to support Ontario's 4 million caregivers, ordinary people who provide physical and emotional support to a family member, partner, friend, or neighbor. We support caregivers by being their one point of access to information, so they have what they need to be successful in their role. OCO draws on the variety of work that is currently being done to ease caregiver burnout and improve the caregiving experience. We find ways to make existing services more broadly available so all caregivers, regardless of age, disease, diagnosis, or location, can access support. To learn more about the Ontario Caregiver Organization, visit ontariocaregiver.ca. And now, back to our episode. You mentioned that your father, I believe you said he was a very pragmatic person, a very practical person. Yes. And we also know that during this time where you were very involved, this 15 years where you lived close to him or with him, you also found very practical solutions in terms of how his life at home was. So how did you adjust your father's home and make sure it was safe? We talked a little bit about this before, but can you talk about some of the safety measures that you put in place for him?
Yeah, and I am going to start by saying that this was also 15, 16, 17 years ago
Mm,
when we didn't have the technology that we have now and some of the really innovative things that are around at this
yeah.
moment. So some of this is quite antiquated and not antiquated, but kind of like what's it called? Jerry rigging
Oh,
things
yes.
to be,
Gerrymandering.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, just to be sure that it worked. And so again, we could go on for days about this discussion because 15 years was a long time, and the changes that happened throughout 15 years or the progression is are a lot. And just like I imagine if you have other vulnerable people at home or young people, or you can't foresee everything. You think you got it figured out, and then you go, how did they find that, or where did they get that, or
Mm,
it's trying to at least deal with the moment because that's all we have, and really part of it is being observant and trying to figure out what is causing either frustration, danger, and being observant and trying to step back and go, okay, that's not normally how that would happen, or that's not how we do things, but stepping back and going, okay, we might have to do it a different way. And that's really hard when you're living with someone as well, when you have your things and they have their things, or they have a way to do things and you have ways
mhm,
to do things. But it started with just figuring out trip hazards and general danger. And so decluttering was a big thing, and trying to remove those hazards and dangers. Another thing which was really interesting for me to find out is any dark flooring or a dark carpet seems to can be construed as a hole in the floor,
mm,
and someone may not walk there anymore. They might try and avoid it or maybe afraid to take a step. So, we had a couple of throw rugs, or at the entrance, actually, a dark black rug, and removing that because he was afraid to come in the door because he thought it was a hole. Um, Adding door locks on everything, door locks. And I don't mean that, he was a prisoner in his own home, but it was a safety measure. And at the front door, just adding a little slide lock up above his eye level was really helpful. If he wanted to go out the front door, he could still turn the doorknob, seem like he's doing something, and then it just wouldn't open. But we did that in a lot of his rooms too that weren't being used. So he knew, in the night, all the other bedrooms were closed, and then the only room open would be the bathroom. So it was
right.
easy for him to see that's the room I have to go to if he woke up in the night. Handrails down both sides of the stairs so he could hold on to both. Physical adjustments like grab bars and things in the tub, the handheld shower, so it was easier and he didn't have to lay down in a bathtub and then have to get back up again. Um, we ended up trying to find a way to block his bathtub because he would get up in the middle of the night and go to the washroom and then crawl into the tub thinking it was his
Oh,
bed.
right.
So we ended up creating these panels that were like a garage door that slid in and out of a track, that looked like a wall. So
Wow.
he wouldn't be able to go there. He lived in an old house that had single pane windows. So we put plexiglass over all the windows. So if he went, to knock on the window or something, there was no way he could hurt himself on the glass. Um, Wayfinding signs all over for him to find his ways. Um, Putting a door at the top of the stairs so he couldn't fall down the stairs. A door that again had a little slide lock at the top, so there was no way he could fall downstairs. Um, oh my gosh, there's so
A lot, but it sounds like you really did. You covered a lot of all the possibilities, which I assume you learned as you went along. Or
Absolutely.
did
Yeah.
you have a resource for this, or was this just sort of you stepping back, taking a look at the situation and saying, okay, what are the possibilities in terms of what could happen here, and then tackling them as they came along?
Yeah, it was just taking a step back and trying to figure it out. And, it started with cooking. And
Mm,
what does that look
a
like in
big
the
one.
kitchen? And how does he navigate all of that? And luckily, because he was so pragmatic, when he wasn't able to cook anymore, he would go and buy ready-made meals. We're again very lucky to be within walking distance of a place that does that. So he would go buy ready-made meals, but how does he navigate a microwave
Mm.
when you have to press so many buttons, time, then start, then open the door or whatever. So, just finding easy appliances for him to use. And we were lucky to find one of those dial microwaves that you just turn the dial, and we would put a piece of tape at the 2 minute mark, and it was red, and he knew at two, like the red was something in his mind that we also had to test and try, and he knew that you don't go past that red mark when he was still able to do his own meals. Yeah, and his obviously at one point his oven had to be turned off or disconnected just to be safe. But those kind of things that, yeah, it was more just observing, and he'd find things and you'd be like, what did he find and where did he get that? So again, going through drawers, going through cupboards, what could be a hazard, and replacing things with plastic. And he loved to rummage and putting safe things that he could rummage where he's not going to cut himself or hurt himself or, drop and it breaks or whatever. So finding all those kind of things was more just through observation. And luckily, I love problem solving. But there are resources. There are occupational therapists who do that. There's lots of resources out there for people to come in and take a look and help you find ways, to keep a home safe as well. But we just didn't. We just had to figure it out.
And I mean, it sounds like you definitely did. And decluttering is also part of that, making a home safer.
Yes.
But the stuff that people have, that they collect, that they hold
Mhm.
on to, and what it means to them, that's very individual. So,
Yeah.
how did you personalize the decluttering process for your dad? Because I do understand that that was part of it for you.
Yeah. So again, just watching, just observing and seeing what he loves to do. And luckily it wasn't a lot. Like he had
Mm.
some old newspapers laying around. He had a lot of old mail. He loved to have a lot of furniture and a lot of things on the counter. Um, so it was just what is he doing with these things? And so the mail, he just liked to flip through the mail because it again made him feel like he had some type of normalcy, right?
Mm.
Everybody gets mail, everybody flips through mail. Well, not anymore, but back
Not as
then
much.
it was.
But for him, yes, no, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
So also just observing what is all this stuff on the counter and what is it for? Like what purpose does it serve for him? And there were a couple of his favorite cups, or he liked again to organize things, like to make it seem like he was organizing things. So there'd be a lot of things and he'd rearrange it and organize it. And so, the decluttering process for us was trying to figure out what are the things that he loves the most or he seems to be attracted to the most, and why? And then how do we get rid of the other stuff? and
Right.
and it was a slow process, and we were lucky that he was in the day program at the time, so he wasn't there to say no, don't take that, or and he was
Mhm.
still very cognitive at that point too. So it was little bits at a time that we could take like a bag at a time, and he wouldn't notice. And then over time, it became, a little cleaner and a little brighter and not so much stuff. And so that was helpful to have the time. and also sometimes, a lot of times I'd ask him, like, Dad, do you think you'd like this? Or what, is there a reason you're keeping this? And he'd go, no, I don't know why I have it. And I'd ask, do you mind if I take it home? I'd use it as it's for me. Do you mind if I'd have it? And he'd say, oh, sure, sure. And then I could get it out of the
Right.
house. So also re rethinking how the approach and involving him. And he was a very generous person. So if I said, oh, I really like this, do you think I could have this at my home? He'd always say yes, which was really sweet. So that made it a lot easier as well. And again, him being pragmatic, sometimes it was just the explanation. If we have all of this, there's a possibility that this could break and you could, and you explain,
Mhm.
and he'd say, oh, yeah, well, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, go ahead. So there were many different approaches, and not all of it was behind his back and being sneaky about it.
Right.
And again, it was as things progressed, obviously the approach changed, but we tried to do all of that at the beginning
Right.
when he was still able to be a part of that conversation.
You're painting a picture for us of how you, again, and it comes back to sort of that personalization, the idea that you want to maintain your dad's sense of him being who he is and the dignity that is involved in that. Are there
Mhm.
any, these are all sort of strategies for making the environment that the person you're caregiving for, it's a supportive one, it's a positive one. Is there any other strategy that you could talk to us about that you had in terms of like making those necessary adjustments, but maintaining this environment of support and positivity for them?
Um, no, I think not no, sorry. There's many things that you can say,
Yeah.
and I think just um being adaptable
Mm-hmm.
is and I know that's hard for a lot of people, but understanding also that this is not being done to you or to them on purpose. And I think sometimes when you're in the throe of it, you say, why is this happening? And what do we do about it? And why are you doing this to me? And I think just taking a step back and again realizing that this isn't um, being done to you or to them. This is something that happened and that we have to kind of go with it. Um, I think finding humor as well
Mm-hmm.
in things was really important for me. And my dad, when we talk about clutter, part of it was he loved picking things up off the floor and the ground and wherever we were. So he would pick it all up, whatever it was. It could be cigarette butts, it could be, and it was again because I think he thought he was cleaning up, he
Mm-hmm.
was helping to clean up, and he'd put them all in his pockets, then he'd come home and dump them in a drawer. And there were some funny things that he would pick up,
Yeah.
and it could be considered gross or whatever. But again, whatever, you wash your hands when you get home. It's not that big of a deal unless it was
Right.
something dangerous. But I think that's part of it too, is just finding the humor and
Mm-hmm.
asking, and sometimes the answers are hilarious if they're verbal, and going with the flow. So it could be not just about decluttering and making the house safe, but I think across all of the journey is, not also making someone feel bad. And I think we have a tendency, if someone makes a mistake, we correct them, or if they say a story that's not true or a little far-fetched, you try and get them back on track. But just going with the flow, because it can end up in a really funny place,
Mm-hmm.
and realizing that this person has changed, and meeting them at those changes instead of hoping to hold on to the person that they were. They're still there, just in a different form, a different part of their journey, right?
Yep.
So I think that's a big thing too, is just finding the humor, and some of those conversations about safety and decluttering and care can be really funny as well.
It's such a valuable perspective that can be it can be hard to find at times, but you're absolutely right. I mean, that's just life is about trying to hold on to the moments that are a little bit funny or that bring you a little bit more joy,
Yeah.
no matter what the situation that you're in.
Hmm.
We often talk to caregivers about that balancing act between caregiving for the people that you love and also taking care of yourself. And I know, again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, we chatted about the fact that there was a big change for you. You moved back to your hometown in order to be a caregiver. But can you also talk a little bit about how caregiving impacted your own health?
Absolutely. For a long time, I didn't think it impacted my health actually,
Mm-hmm.
because you just jump in and do what you do, and
Mm-hmm.
that's very common, and you think you can do it by yourself. And you have no idea what this journey is going to look like and what toll, and I don't mean toll in a negative way, but how it'll impact you and your loved one. So, for a long time, I didn't acknowledge that I needed any help, which wasn't helpful. You can only do so much by yourself.
Right.
I wouldn't accept help from people. I wasn't really interested in the services at the beginning because I could do this. I'm a project manager and this is my dad and I can figure this all out. So for many years, I didn't take the help and it eventually ended up taking its toll.
Mm.
You know, it's really important to find that balance. And I know people say it all the time. And when you're in the thick of it all, it's really hard to figure out, you feel that there's not even enough time in the day to do everything, let alone invest in yourself as well at the same time. Just it seems almost impossible. But I think, just first of all, asking for help really made a difference because then there was a little bit of respite care.
Mm-hmm.
And that little bit of respite care allowed me to go for walks or whatever it is that filled my cup and gave me a break. That was really important to have that balance. I hate to say though, that balance happened late, like
Mm.
year 10 or 12 in the
Okay.
journey. And it was needed because at that point, my dad was dependent on me on all activities of daily living. So that really takes its toll. And so when he was semi-independent, it didn't seem to be that big of a deal, but to be on call 24/7, to be on watch 24/7, to be, you're that person. It still does take its toll, even if someone's semi-independent, you're still the one thinking about everything and trying to arrange everything and
For
trying
sure.
to be sure that they're safe. So I think that's a really long answer to the fact that it took its toll on my physical health and my mental health. And I think part of it is because I didn't think I needed help,
Right.
and eventually your body tells you no.
It can. I mean, there's a lot of physical effort that can be involved in caregiving, and then
Hmm.
there's sort of the, like you said, the mental health piece of being in that state of hypervigilance and
Hmm.
always, anticipating the needs of someone else entirely, and maybe putting your own aside. Were there particular strategies when you did ask for help that you employed to sort of seek and receive support? You mentioned you had a really good community support, especially in the beginning when you weren't living close by. But
Hmm.
how did you sort of decide to reach out to your community or your network, and how did you find an effective way to do that?
Hmm. So the community ended up being, because the people who were really supportive while I was away were no
Mm-hmm.
longer in
Okay.
the area, and I'm an only child, so there wasn't any family support necessarily
Mm-hmm.
directly with my father. I mean, there was support emotionally for me, but not to directly help my father. Um, so I think it was just the people that I did have in my circle, they acknowledged that I wasn't doing well.
Mm.
And they started to offer more, which was really helpful because I didn't like asking. And then just tapping into the resources again in the community. And we ended up hiring some private caregivers as well. So we could have a few good chunks of hours on a weekend, for instance, to go and remove ourselves and know that they were with people we trusted, who
Hmm.
were vetted and who understood the whole caregiving journey that we were trying to provide. So I think it was just really taking a step back and realizing what it is that I need and what we need, my husband and I as well, to have that break and finding ways to make it happen and having to hire private was one of the ways to make it happen. And that was also a challenge because it costs
Mm.
money.
Of course. Looking for support and connection as a caregiver? Our online support group is here for you. Join a community of fellow caregivers who understand the ups and downs of your role. Share your concerns and successes in a supportive environment led by trained peer support group facilitators who have firsthand experience as caregivers. Please note that our online support groups are not intended for crisis support or mental health counseling. Visit ontariocaregiver.ca to learn more. And now, back to our episode. Do you feel that you were able to strike a balance when you started to employ those strategies, or did you feel like you got to that place during that time, or was it still something that felt a little elusive to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question actually, because we love to say find a balance, but you're never off. You're always on. So that's difficult. And it's with anybody who's caring for anybody, right? You can't just flip a switch and say, I'm out. And if
Yeah.
anything happens, I'm not here. So, yes, in one way, I found I was able to find a balance where at least it gave us respite from the home, from being in the same home, and doing things that we enjoy when we had those few hours. But on the flip side, you're still always on and
Yeah.
always on call. So, to answer that question, I don't know if I would call that really balance. Um, because balance is also many other aspects of your life too. So
Mm-hmm.
just stepping back and acknowledging that you don't have a lot of time to do that while you're caregiving and
Right.
saying, okay, how do I figure this all out? You're just in, like you said, in the hyper vigilant mode of getting things done, right?
Right.
So I tried and then some things worked and some things didn't, and my body has let me know that.
And it's important to listen to that. I'm glad you were able to, I mean, I know it's difficult to be able to, you know, afford for some people that private care to come in, but I'm glad that you were able to sort of give yourself a little bit of a break in that way, or in, even in the beginning, relying on your community.
Mhm.
It does sound like you worked out a lot of solutions that worked for you and for your father in your
Mhm.
caregiving journey. Can you share, before we wrap up, any sort of lessons or advice for other caregivers who might have just found out, okay, I'm at the beginning here and I am caring for a loved one with dementia? Is there anything that you might want to say to them?
Yeah, I think as difficult as it is, just realizing that this is your loved one, and this is still someone who has been with you throughout your whole life, and there's ways to embrace the journey and there's ways to ask for help. And I think that's one of the biggest things is asking for help. And again, just talked about balance. You may not even feel you have a balance, but at least you have someone there alongside you. So there's no shame in asking for help. And the other thing I would say is patience. It's not an easy thing to be a caregiver for anybody, let alone someone who you may love so much. Um, so I think that those are the two things, definitely asking for help and being patient and gracious with yourself.
Those are two really important things. And my hope is that there are listeners that are tuning into our conversation that are going to need to hear somebody say that to them. And then they're going to go, okay, maybe, you know what, maybe it's time for me to reach out to my network or look for the help that I need, possibly through the Ontario Caregiver Organization. That's really what we want to do, is encourage people to share their stories and also find the resources that are available to them. So I really do appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today and to share your story and your dad's story. Shara, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much. It was lovely to be able to do this. And I hope that there's little tips and tricks in there that people can take away.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. You can access more details about support services on our website, ontariocaregiver.ca. Until next time, I'm Michelle Jobin, and you have been listening to Time to Talk, a podcast for caregivers. We hope you have a wonderful day.